Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today I thought I'd do a bit of an interesting video, and I know I'm going to get the Glock crowd angry, but bear with me, watch the whole video, and see everything that I have to say. Now today's video essentially is going to be why I personally hate Glocks, and why I think you should like Glocks. Now, there's a couple things about Glocks. As you can see here, I don't have a Glock here, and that's because I personally don't own a Glock. That being said, I do have a bit of training on a Glock. It's been quite a few years since I fired a Glock. It was either a Glock 17 Gen 1 or Gen 2 that I fired, so quite an old Glock. And it did actually make a lasting impression on me when it came to the experience of the Glock, as well as back in the early 2000s, I had a Smith & Wesson, I believe it was a Smith & Wesson 40P, which was part of the Sigma series, which essentially was Smith & Wesson's answer to the Glock, and in general terms, it was a Glock. Same, for the most part, the same style, shape, the whole 9 yards. It had a lot of features that the Glock had. Alright, so let's start with why I don't like Glocks. And then I'll get into why you should like Glocks. Now, one thing I don't like about Glocks is, one, they're a brick. As you can see here, you know, these have curves to them. I like a curvy pistol. I like a curvy woman too, but that's besides the point. And even this one here has some curves to it, even though it does have some flat edges as well, like along the top. Another thing I really don't like about Glocks is the polymer sights. One, I don't trust polymer sights. Two, I don't like the sights on a Glock in general. And just a quick disclaimer, I forgot to say something. Both these guns have been cleared before I even started, but for the brevity of YouTube here, because someone would be like, oh, you should have cleared your guns before you handled them. The magazine is empty. The chamber is empty. Okay. The magazine is empty. You can see the orange follower. And the chamber is empty. I've actually cleared these 3 times even before I started recording. I actually cleared them upstairs when I pulled them out of my safe. And I cleared them again even before I brought them downstairs, and I literally cleared them again even before I started recording. So yeah, they're clear. I didn't think about it first because I literally cleared them about 5 minutes ago. But moving back on to the whole subject with Glocks, the next thing I'm not fond of with the Glocks, I covered the polymer sights. I'm not overly trustworthy in polymer sights. And to be honest, I don't understand why Glock uses polymer sights. Metal sights really don't cost much more money. They're more durable. They're generally tougher. Things of that nature. And honestly, I really don't like the design of the polymer sights in general. I think the sights on a Glock, personally, in my personal opinion, are pretty crap. And that being said, as you can see, I got a 1911 type handgun here. This is more based on like the Colt Commander or something along those lines. Now this one has good sights, but we all know that the old 1911s also had some crappy sights. Now that being said, I can make them work for me, but I've also had extensive training in different types of 1911 platforms. And honestly, the Glock sights are not even superior to this pistol here, which this is a Model 3904, has a rear adjustable sight, has a front sight. The sights are metal. The front sight here is fixed, and then the rear sight is adjustable. And it can be easily adjusted with a screwdriver. So it makes actually adjusting the sights real easy. The next thing I have, my next gripe about Glocks, is actually the trigger. This is a double action handgun. Now, what I consider a double action handgun is a handgun that can be fired just by pulling the trigger, as so, or if I cock the hammer back, the trigger will go back and it will still fire. Now with this one here, 1911 style, this is a single action. It will only fire if the hammer is back. Now with a Glock though, the Glock is a double action only trigger, So the trigger is always going to be in the same place to fire. So you're always going to have that large amount of travel. See how much travel there is in this handgun? Now if I pull the hammer back, as you can see, it takes up a lot of slack. Now there is flaws in having the single action, double action type triggers, but the Glocks are double action only. Now there's a benefit to it being a double action only, and I'll get into that here in a bit on more or less why you should like Glocks. The next thing I really don't like about the Glock triggers though is they feel kind of mushy to me. They feel more mushy than this does. Like this is kind of a heavy double action trigger, but it feels consistent and resistant, where it just, for a Glock, it just kind of feels muddy. And I know someone's going to say, oh, well, you can always replace the Glock trigger. I'll get in, just to be honest, why would I buy a Glock, end up replacing the trigger with a better trigger when there's literally, what, thousands of different types of pistols out there with different types of triggers? I can just buy something straight out of a box that's got a superior trigger to a Glock. And honestly, most triggers are superior to Glock triggers. I'm not saying all, because there is some bad triggers out there. And even for handguns that are double action only, yeah, there's still, once again, better triggers than Glock. Even the Walther P99, which is a double action only, has a better trigger than a Glock. Now, the next thing I don't like also is the safety is on the trigger. That's the only safety on the gun. I prefer having a manual safety, such as with this 1911. Actually, I think this is the best because it's easily, when I go to grab the handgun, it's easily can be turned off, toggled with my thumb. I don't have to reach out of position. Like with this one, it's kind of back a little bit. So for me to actuate this one, I kind of have to, you know, pull my thumb way back out of position to actuate the safety. As you can see there, I'm trying to actuate the safety, and it's not as good as it is with the 1911 style, where it's right here on the frame. And this is very similar also to the Beretta, but I think with the Beretta, it's a little bit farther forward, so it's a little bit easier to actuate than it is on the Smith & Wesson here, but that's neither here nor there. So honestly, the fact that it doesn't have a safety, it really is kind of a turnoff for me. Some people like that. I think it's a bad idea. And honestly, I seen an article, I want to say it was like 2020, maybe it was further than that, where the article was focused on negligent discharges with handguns. And the article, whoever wrote the article, essentially was able to find out that an overwhelming majority of negligent discharges was done with a Glock type handgun, is how it was written in the article. And essentially guns like the Springfield Armory, the Springfield Armory XDs, the PSA daggers, although I'm not sure if PSA dagger was around at that time, Glocks itself, the Smith & Wesson Sigma series guns, even the Smith & Wesson M&Ps, that's actually where most of the negligent discharges are coming from, and they're saying 50%, the article said about 50% is negligent discharges is done with a Glock type handgun. So honestly, reading stuff like that and my impressions of having the safety on the trigger and that being the only safety on the gun, it kind of verifies my suspicion. Consider that what you will. I'm trying to, the next thing about the Glocks is they are a lightweight handgun. I'm not overly fond of the weight though. I prefer something a little heavier, a little beefier, something like a 1911, or even this here is a little bit heavier than a Glock. Now, that being said, Glocks are made with a polymer frame. I am not fond of a polymer frame. I'm okay with aluminum, like this here has an aluminum frame. Well, it's actually aluminum alloy frame. I think that's tops. Or obviously you have steel forged type frames or machined type frames. I think when it comes to frames, the frame has to be metal. I am not fond of Glock frames. Finally, the next thing, I might have already stated this, but I want to make sure I did, is Glocks they're shaped like a brick. And I'm not really fond of the brick shape of the Glocks. Finally, with Glocks, now this is only the Glock 17. I believe it was the Glock 17 in particular. Is the angle of the grip is kind of trash. The grips themselves are kind of trash, especially the more shaped type grips where they got the finger, the finger shapes in the grip. I really don't like those because my fingers almost never line up with those that finger type grip. And the angle itself, like the 1911 has like the perfect style angle to me. Now, that's all my hate for Glocks. As you can generally tell, I actually dislike Glocks. I have a very educated opinion on why I dislike Glocks and, you know, experiences and things of that nature. But I'm going to also tell you why I think you should like Glocks and maybe even why you should get a Glock. Now, first off, with both of these pistols are single stack magazines. This one is a single stack 8, or sorry, that's a single stack 9, my bad. This one is the single stack 8. Now, with both of these pistols, I can even get longer magazines. With 1911s, you can get like extended, I've seen up to 14 shot. The only thing is with the 14 shot extended mags, okay, you see how that fits in nice and flush with like the 14 shot extended mags. The mag sticks out like this far. Now with the Glocks, they have a double stack magazine which fits real nicely in the gun. I've seen anywhere from 15 to actually 33 shot magazines, or maybe it was 32 shot. I'm pretty sure it was 33 shots that you can put into a Glock. Now with the 32 shot, like they stick out way out the bottom. But with that being said, you get a lot more shots with a Glock than you do with a 1911 or even this type of handgun here. Now with that being said, that's a good advantage, but Glock's not the only one with that advantage. Beretta comes with a 15 shot double stack magazine. You can actually get 18 shot double stack magazines for the Beretta. The SIG M17 comes with 18 shot double stack magazines, or you can get a 21 shot double stack magazine. And the list goes on. I believe it's an 18 shot double stack magazine for like the Steyr GB. So Glock's not the only one that get that advantage, but in my honest opinion, that is a good advantage if you feel like it's necessary to have that many shots. And at times, probably on a rare occasion, that is a benefit. And honestly, in my opinion, that's more fun time at the range, so that is a benefit just in that in itself. Now the next thing with Glocks, especially compared to this one, where it's got the single double action trigger, it's got a double action only trigger. I know people are going to be like, well, he was just shitting on the double action only trigger earlier. Here's the thing. With this type of trigger, it's a double action now. Now once I fire, the gun will cycle, the slide will come, well, it won't now because it's empty. The gun will cycle, and as you can see, it is now single action. Some people have trouble mastering these type of triggers. These type of triggers do take more practice to learn how to use versus the double shot or double action only triggers where it's always a constant trigger pull. So there's a bit of advantage there. Now also, some people do feel that the safety system where the Glock has a trigger style safety is beneficial. Me personally, I don't think so, and I've already covered that, so I'm not going to get into it. But some people actually do enjoy that. Now with Glocks, compared to 1911s or even this here, this 3904, there's like next to no accessories for this handgun. And mostly that's because it's a handgun out of production, and Honestly, a lot of accessories for handguns like this really didn't exist at the time. People were not overly customizing their handguns at the time. Now they would do trigger customizations. The sights on this can be replaced, things of that nature. The trigger could be, worked on, but basically a lot of the customization at that time was internal. Where now you have things like red dot sights, flashlights, lasers. For this one, I would honestly, I'm not even sure how I would do it. I know there is a laser sight for this. I believe it's like one of the grip type laser sights where it's actually like up here on the grip, on the side. I've never really looked at one. I've never felt the need for a laser sight. And then when it comes to a tactical light, I have no idea how you'd mount a tactical light to this. Let alone, I don't know how you'd mount a tactical light to this one, because this one doesn't have the pick rail at the bottom. That being said, there is a lot of guns out there now that does come with pick rails on the bottom. The next thing is, now with this one, I believe I can remove the rear sight and actually get a plate for it so I can put a red dot on it. But Glocks, most of the Glocks, especially like the Gen 5s, I'm not so sure about the Gen 4s and Gen 3s. Most of those, from what I understand, are good to go with red dots, or that you can get red dots for them without doing too many additional modifications or parts. They're just good to go. So there's a benefit there if you're looking for a red dot. I'm not a red dot guy myself, not when it comes to pistols. The next thing about Glocks is Glocks comes in a lot of different flavors of calibers, magazine sizes, the whole 9 yards. As well as there's a lot of different flavors of Glocks when it comes to the size of the handgun in itself. Not saying that there's not for the 1911. For this one, well, they really only get bigger from here. There was another version of this that was called a 5904 that had a fatter grip and it was slightly larger. And that one actually had like a 14-shot double stack magazine. So actually there's other versions of this as well. But basically they really only get bigger from here. And this is more or less the baseline 3904, which is actually based on the Model 39, and even the Model 39 is only about the size of this thing. Now that being said, I think this is the perfect size for a concealed carried handgun. But with Glocks, you can get even smaller versions of Glocks. Now for those that like to heavily customize their guns, not just laser sights and flashlights I'm talking about, making changes to the internals, like the trigger, changing the sights, the whole 9 yards. There's a lot of different things out there you can do to a Glock to make those kinds of changes. And actually, from what I understand, when it comes to Glocks, not speaking from experience, just going by what I see online, it's quite easy for a Glock. The Glock has kind of become the basic bitch handgun. It does everything, it just doesn't do anything incredibly well. I think I want to say that's really about all I got for you. So I mean, another thing too to really like about Glocks, and this is something I kind of forgot about covering here, is when it comes to Glocks, they're actually pretty damn reliable. Now, they're not the most reliable handgun in the world. And sorry, Glock fanboys, I hate to break it to you. Your Glocks are not the most reliable guns in the world. There is more reliable handguns, C1911s. And that's going by testing that various gun tubers have done, as well as various testing I've seen. Now that being said, there is some shitty 1911s out there. So the 1911s can be a mixed grab bag as well. Either way, with that being said, Glocks are still pretty damn reliable handguns. And for the most part, only realistically, I've only seen Glocks fail in the most extreme conditions. So there you go when it comes to that. Now with some of the tests I've seen, interestingly enough, the Springfield M&P 2.0 actually seems to be the better handgun when it comes to reliability. But that being said, it's kind of a marginal type thing. Now the next thing about Glocks, the most popular Glocks are usually chambered in 1911, or 1911? Oh boy. The most popular Glocks are chambered in 9mm. And with that being said, 9mm is literally the most popular cartridge in the world. So more than likely, if you're going to run into a Glock at a gun store, you're going to find various different shapes and sizes of Glocks in 9mm. I'm not saying you can't buy Glocks or you can't buy certain types of guns in other calibers. Both of these are 9mm handguns. But that being said, most commonly if you find a Glock, it's probably going to be a 9mm, which, like I said, 9mm is the popular cartridge. Next thing is the price tag of a Glock. I see Glocks ranging anywhere from I've seen them range as low as 400. So I've seen Glocks go about 4.5 for maybe like a used Glock, as up to $650 for a new Glock. You know, and kind of everywhere in between. I've seen various prices for Glocks. Glocks are pretty cheap. Now, when it comes to 1911s, you can buy some cheap 1911s. I've seen 1911s as low as $400 for a brand new 1911. That being said, when it comes to like the fit and finish quality, 1911s that cheap tend to be actually pretty poor. Where Glocks, you know you're going to get a decent quality handgun at that price point. So, you know, and that being said, there is still quality handguns that are cheaper than Glocks. But in my honest opinion, there's not many. There's not many that has the finish quality that the Glock does at a cheaper price point. Now, the next thing is the barrel height. That makes actually the Glocks a little bit more inherently accurate. However, one issue is, or well, actually two issues, because of the poor sights, in my opinion, and the trigger, the double action only trigger, it's kind of one of those that the bore height is, well, the bore over sight height is really good and helps make the Glock a little bit more inherently accurate. But the one flaw is because of the trigger and because of other things, it kind of affects actually how accurate the Glock can be. So it's got one thing that's really beneficial, but then it's got like two other things it's not so beneficial. But anyway, folks, that's really it. That's my opinions about Glocks. They do have their good points. They do have their bad points. They're not the end-all, be-all gun. A lot of people make you want to believe that they are the end-all, be-all gun. Sorry to break it to you, they're not. And in all honesty, when you like look out there at the pistols, you know, even including revolvers, even CCW type pistols, the micro pistols, Derringers, and so on and so forth, there really, in my opinion, is no end-all, be-all gun. And probably the closest thing that comes to, in my opinion, for an end-all, be-all gun would be maybe the SIG 17 or the SIG P226 or the Beretta. Well, the Beretta M9 to be specific. But yeah, to me, there's just no end-all, be-all gun. So if you got someone in your chat, on your forum, whatever, saying, oh, you should have got a Glock because it's the greatest handgun in the world, no, he's lying to you. There really isn't. It's really all personal preference. Every gun's got its benefits and its faults and so on and so forth. And actually, I'm going to do a part 2 of this video where I'm actually going to be talking about 1911s in depth, because that is actually my handgun of choice. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap the video up at that. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and have yourself a wonderful day.